Уважаемые коллеги, добрый день.
Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I am happy to welcome all of you at this conference dedicated to the problems of the Arctic. 3 years ago, we held our first conference like this, which, as viewed by all of the attendees, was a success. And during these 3 years, as you know, unfortunately, the international environment in the world has seriously tensed itself. There are quite a few regional problems. The relations between Russia and the Western countries have become difficult. We see problems in Europe with the flows of the immigrants. We see the problems in the Middle East. And at the same time, despite this complicated international background, our cooperation in the Arctic region persevered and continued to develop successfully, demonstrating that the strong political will and an awareness of the importance of such a cooperation helps us all to move on in establishing a new foundation for the system of international cooperation in this most important for all the countries and for the whole of the mankind region. Today we are holding another of our conferences, and I'm very appreciative to the government staff, to the Ministry for Foreign Affairs for the support that they have given us in organizing this forum. I am appreciative to Novatek and other our partners in organizing this, and so we very much hope that as the result of the work which we started yesterday during various workshops and seminars and during this day, we will be able to make a modest contribution into strengthening the Arctic cooperation. And now please allow me to pass the microphone to Dmitry ROGOZIN, Deputy Chairman of the government, who heads the Government Arctic Commission, who is the plenipotentiary and extraordinary ambassador of Russia. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Greetings to the participants of this conference from Russia and from other countries. It's great to note this strong attention to the Arctic topic, which is justified by the fact that the Arctic Council members are present and the Arctic nations representatives are present: Denmark, United States, Canada, Norway, Finland. And for Russia, this is an extremely important topic. The Arctic, this is the region of our special interests, and here we see the concentration of almost all of the aspects of our national security in the areas of defense, environment, transportation, and resource interests. Today, the leading international players are also paying an increasing attention to the Arctic. Unfortunately, sometimes that transforms itself into a strengthening of competition, into a contradiction between various ambitions and interests, including non-Arctic states. But nevertheless, as is being acknowledged by the supreme political leadership of the Arctic nations in the European Union, the Arctic is one of the few areas where the international cooperation with Russia not only didn't stop, but actively continues. We even had to in terms of such a sacred place as the space, had to reduce our cooperation with the leading Western states, but the Arctic remains exactly the opposite kind of an example. So these are not empty words, because as part of the Arctic Council operations, not a single project that was launched from the Arctic Council was stopped, and Russia considers its neighbors in the Arctic region as natural and priority kind of partners, for which purpose we have very specific proposals, and I will tell you about them later. The sanctional policy enabled us to open new opportunities to cooperate in the Arctic with our Asian partners. First of all, in the economic area, in joint establishment of major energy and transportation and infrastructure projects on the basis of the development of oil and gas deposits. The most eloquent examples is the implementation with the participation of China of the Yamal LNG project, as well as the development with the participation of the Indian colleagues of the Vankor oil and gas field. As far as the Korean, South Korean and Japanese partners are concerned, we're very active in cooperating in building ships and various marine equipment for the development of the Arctic natural resources. I can tell you that In a very active way, we are collaborating with our neighbors in Asia in creating a unique, gigantic shipyard, Zvezda, the star, in the city of Большой Камень, the big stone, in the Primorsk region, where we cooperate with the South Korean and Japanese partners. Irrespective of the presence of international cooperation in our projects, Russia essentially doesn't have any other way but to sustainably and consistent development of the Arctic zone, as tasked by the Government Commission for the development of the Arctic. I would like to specifically emphasize the Government Commission, the State Commission, I would rather say, rather than the government. The President made a decision to raise the status of this specific commission, which convened under its auspices all of the leading federal authorities, expert community, and the businesses. So, as tasked by this State Commission, the Ministry for Economic Development, together with the federal regional authorities and organizations, prepared a certain portfolio of projects which are currently being implemented, or the ones which are being assessed right now by the government for an imminent implementation in the Arctic area. We have selected 150 priority projects which would be running of up to 2030 with a total value of about 5 trillion rubles, while the majority of funds, which is about 4 trillion rubles, are coming from non-government, non-state sources. So as not to waste your time and enumerate all of the project, I will just quote some figures which would describe the sectoral adherence of this project. Processing of natural resources, this is more than 48% weight, including diamonds, 14%. Transportation, 16%. Exploration, 7%. Offshore projects, 7%. Industry and energy, 5%. Fishing and agriculture, 5%. And environment, telecommunications, and tourism, 2% each. Amongst these projects, there are such ones as Prirazlomne, Yamal LNG, the construction of the Sabeta Marine Port, the North Latitude Passage, the Murmansk Transportation Hub, construction of icebreakers, including nuclear icebreakers of the new generation, and production of technology and equipment to operate in the Arctic. Some of the selected projects will allow us to diversify the economy of the Arctic mono-cities such as Vorkuta, Severodvinsk, Onega, Novodvinsk, as well as to ensure upgrading and modernization and a timely substitution of the decommissioned capacities like in energy as well as in shipbuilding. So based on the need to develop the cluster for the social economic development in the Arctic zone around these hubs of the economic development, the Ministry of Economic Development of Russia is working on identifying the hub development zones. In other words, we're anticipating to create the project offices within every Arctic district and region, which will be related to each other with a single communication system, as well as the economic, social, and transportation system. This mechanism will be strengthened by the unique territorial federal law on the development of the Arctic zone of Russia and implement it within this new draft of the text, the social development of the Arctic zone, which will cover the period of up to 2020 and beyond. So we anticipate to enter into a so-called social contract between the government and the businesses, when the government will be applying efforts to eliminate infrastructural barriers and sometimes even creating new infrastructure in the Arctic area, while the businessmen will be taking the commitment to invest. Besides that, the development of the Arctic zone in Russia, in terms of the project rationale, envisages the application of ineffective methods of already existing tools of the government support, which without doubt, as we hope, will improve the investment attraction of these projects wherever it's appropriate. And I would say such instruments as free ports, the advanced development territories, the special economic zones, and industrial parks. We see the Arctic as the testing ground for trying new innovative technologies who are commissioned in the first place by the government and may be commissioned by the government in the person of those who are directly in charge of the government-sponsored program of the Arctic development and the big businesses like the natural resource producers. So what kind of projects are these? Some of them are already being done, and in an immediate future, within 12-18 months, are going to be tried and tested in the Arctic zones. This is the development of the new materials and fuels which can be used in the extreme low temperature environment, Then the development of the Arctic transportation equipment, small aviation helicopters, because currently we're having helicopters being produced for a longer range and which can operate in such an aggressive environment like the Arctic latitudes. Small aviation will be produced by 2019 using the ski chassis which can be operating in the Arctic areas to substitute the former Soviet fleet of the aircraft which are coming to the end of their useful operation. These are the ice-class river, ocean ships, special equipment and transportation vehicles. And today we are making a decision just to start and launch the project, but soon the final government decision is going to be made to produce a super-class icebreaker, a leading icebreaker with a capacity of more than 110 megawatt, which will be able to work on the thickness of the ice exceeding 4.5 meters. Almost 5 meters this icebreaker will be able to break, which means that in this way we will be able at any point in time, in any season, in any weather, even against the most adverse conditions, we'll be able to make sure that the northern marine route can work and allow not only the different transportation to pass through it, but different gas tankers to pass of the biggest displacement, the Arctic ones, with a dead weight at least 300,000 tons. The modern exploration equipment, similarly, is currently being developed, and I personally visited the North Pole and I saw what our people use there, and frankly speaking, I was a little bit disappointed seeing that all of the equipment was imported. So respective tasks have been issued and they're being worked on, and our polar explorers are going to be equipped with the modern Russian-produced exploration equipment. We are similarly interested in a quick production of biotechnology to produce environmentally clean products and seeds, and so as to develop the pharmacological and the bioseeds that have been tested to work in the Arctic. The tests underwent with the Arctic climate would receive the Arctic mark of quality. And this decision was made in Novosibirsk during the Technoprom Forum. Indeed, our industrialists and our industrial experts came to a realization: if such technologies and such an equipment is capable of successfully working with an extensive resource in the Arctic zone, in this one may state that this equipment went through the most difficult test and can be very much in demand in other places. So selection in terms of our approaches is not changing. Civilized approach on the basis of the international law, and as I said, our country is open for a joint cooperation in the Arctic on a multilateral and bilateral basis, including, in the first place, amongst other things, in the Arctic Council. We consider the Arctic as the territory of the dialogue, cooperation, and we intend to decisively counteract any efforts to bring into this region all kinds of intrigues and disputes, the policy of nervousness and confrontation. Dear colleagues, using this opportunity, I would like to invite you to attend one very important event. We decided on March 30th, 2017, in the city of Archangel, to hold the International Forum. The Arctic is the territory of the dialogue. This forum traditionally is being held with the participation of the Russian President Vladimir Putin. There was a bit of a pause in the string of such events, but it was filled up by active and dynamic activities that we undertook to create new technologies that could be employed in the Arctic. And so I hope that we would be able to visually introduce you to these technologies, because we would set up an exhibition of the equipment, machinery, and technology which have recently been produced to develop the Arctic, and there will be a very representative attendance, without mentioning the fact that we very much hope that our leader, Vladimir Putin, will attend it as well. So I invite you to come to the Arctic zone, first of all, to the city of Archangel, which has long deserved the right to host such events. This is a historic city which opens, or exposes rather, the interest toward the Russian North. So I hope that you will find this forum useful and pleasant. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thanks for to the organizers for this invitation. Thank you very much, Dmitry Olegovich, for your presentation. In the course of our plenary meeting, we will have an opportunity to elaborate upon various items that you touched in your speech. And I would like to give the floor to Sergey Ivanov, who is the special presidential representative on the issues of environment, ecology, and transportation, extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassador. So, as I understand, this is Sergey Borisovich's first presentation in such a capacity, so we very much hope that he will be a regular guest at all of the events that the Russian International Affairs Council will organize. Good afternoon, dear Igor Sergeyevich and dear colleagues. I note that we're all about extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassadors speaking here. Well, this is a good tradition. So the foreign affairs people are ruling. So I am sincerely appreciative for the invitation to participate in this RIAC conference, which has truly earned this acknowledgement as a very authoritative and reputable club, uniting the leading experts who are knowledgeable about the way to resolve the most complicated issues that the international community is facing. Igor Sergeyevich, in his introduction, has briefly listed these multiple difficult problems, but fortunately, the Arctic and the environment are not part of this list of complications, I believe. And today, as has already been mentioned, in the focus of our attention is the Arctic, its problems, its challenges, and development vectors. This is indeed a very broad topic, multifaceted one. I don't want to avoid being a banal speaker about saying how fragile Arctic is, how big are the risks for any economic activity which is simply let go on its own. Everybody knows about it. On the other hand, one shouldn't dispute the obvious fact that the Arctic is the territory which is exceptionally interesting in terms of the energy, economic development, and its transportation potential. But simultaneously, the Arctic is the kind of a region which provides the environmental and ecological resilience in our global security, the valueless source of unique scientific knowledge. And based on that, we're all trying to our best to care for the Arctic, undertaking effective measures to preserve its flora and fauna, being careful in utilizing its resources, and being expedient in eliminating the consequences of what we do. Currently, Russia has set a very high environmental standard and consistently executes a whole number of large-scale environmental protection projects, specifically within the Arctic Zone Strategic Development Plan and ensuring the national security for the period of 2020. Work is being done to establish the system of monitoring and forecasting of economic activities in the Arctic shelf. Its main purpose is to reduce possible risks related to the development of the hydrocarbon deposits and the development of the transportation infrastructure. Besides, in accordance with the federal law, I want to emphasize the already enforced this law. Very much strict commitments of businesses are combined with very strict financial accountability of the natural deposit developers to prevent and eliminate oil leakages and such calamities. In the licenses that are being issued to them, they are accountable to apply only well-tested technologies to eliminate technogenous catastrophes, rather than some kind of solutions or projected measures which the natural resource developers may say they can effectively apply. Only the well-proven ones. And sometimes that would mean an application of immense financial sanctions on them, which I believe is appropriate. Another good initiative is the general cleaning of the Arctic, which is being done following the presidential task. As its pilot measure, we selected the Franz Josef Archipelago island because during the past 5 years, it has changed immeasurably. More than 40,000 tons of different waste and debris metal scrap and the so-called oil sludge was transported from away, because for so many years, for so many decades, waste collected there, and we did technical rehabilitation in the area of 350 hectares. Next year, which was announced the year of Ecology, we're launching another project which is called the Clean Country. The accumulated natural detriment will be eliminated everywhere, and we will continue cleaning up the polar areas, as well as we plan to bring to the surface the sunken ships in the Kolar area and near the city of Salihard and the two districts in the Yamala-Nenetsk Autonomous District. Now let me dwell upon the issue of the preservation of the pristine nature of the North. At this point in time, in our part of the Arctic region, there are already 28 specially preserved in natural territories of the federal importance, where you find such landscapes of tundras and Arctic deserts, the marine ecosystems, the very special flora and fauna. The overall space of these special preservation areas in the near Arctic area is 22.5 million hectares, including 6.5 million is the aquatic space of it. Till 2020, there will be additional 2 national preservation parks established: the Central Chukotka Park, of course in the Chukotka region, and the Hibinas in the Murmansk area, and a new national park, the Bear Islands in the north of Yakutia. Overall, in the Russian territory, you find about 80% of the Arctic biodiversity, which imposes upon Russia very special responsibility to preserve this unique natural potential. I may list such rare representatives of the Arctic fauna as the polar bear, known to everyone, but other animals which are not so well known: the Putaran snow leopard and the Laptev seal and different kind of whales. So focusing our own efforts at protecting the most sensitive to the changes of the environment Arctic region, Russia certainly continues to successfully cooperate with partners in different international corporations, and first of all in the Arctic Council. To the full extent, like I said, that applies to the Arctic Council, the 20th anniversary of which this conference is celebrating. Preparing myself for the conference, I looked through the materials about the Arctic Council, and I noted that there are 6 successfully functioning working groups under the auspices of the Arctic Council, and each of them, one way or another, has this bearing upon the environment. Some of them directly, some indirectly, but each of these 6 groups is related to the environmental protection topic. And throughout the years of its existence, within the Arctic Council projects, a lot of very useful environmental initiatives have been undertaken. By way of an example, I can quote a framework document on the activities to reduce the black soot and methane pollution, and I believe this is a very timely response to the global warming. In its further development, in September last year, the Ministry of Natural Resources of Russia prepared the national white paper or report to run the inventory in terms of the black soot and methane pollution in the Russian Arctic area. We continue to do more work and participate, amongst other things, in the work done by the Special Purpose Group to continue the dialogue between the countries to reduce the emission of black carbon and methane, which was set forth under the current U.S. chairmanship in the Arctic Council. As far as the additional mechanisms are concerned, which facilitate the resolution of the environmental problems, without doubt, this is the instrument supporting various projects to facilitate funding to the project of the Arctic Council related to the prevention, reduction, and elimination of pollution. Our country became the biggest donor to this respective foundation and has fully acted on all of its commitment on time, having paid about 10 million euros into this initiative, where we are the biggest contributor. In 2015, with its support, first projects were launched called Valdai and Tundra, whose aim was, amongst others, to reduce the emission of waste as a result of generation of power in Karelian Republic and in Murmansk. Dear colleagues, concluding my presentation, I would like to express confidence that together we're capable of resolving many issues related to the development of the Arctic, the development of favorable environment there. And once again, I would like to thank the leadership of the Russian International Affairs Council for the organization of such a major representative forum. And using this opportunity, I would also like Dmitry said, to invite everybody to come to Archangel in March 2017. Thank you very much for your attention. Great many thanks, Sergey Borisovich, for your contribution, for your participation in this conference, for a very useful and important information. Now, I would like to inform the participants of this conference that the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergey Lavrov, was very supportive of this initiative from the very beginning. He intended to come around, but exactly because of this international political environment, he's not with us, but he sent his greetings, and I would ask the special representatives of Russia in the Arctic Council, Vadim Barbin, who is the special ambassador of Russia in the Arctic Council, to read Mr. Lavrov's greetings. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Please allow me to announce the word of greeting from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergey Lavrov. I am heartily greeting the organizers and participants of the Conference International Cooperation in the Arctic, New Challenges and Vectors of Development, dedicated to the 20th anniversary of the Arctic Council. Russia consistently acts for the strengthening of the multilateral cooperation in Russia, the resolution of its vital issues on the basis of international law, through mutual respectful dialogue and taking into account the interests of all of the Arctic states. We act on the premise that the basic platform for the search for the optimal responses to the common challenges and the development of the positive agenda is the Arctic Council, the key role of which was confirmed in the joint declaration of the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the regional countries in September this year. We highly appreciate the contribution by the Arctic Council into providing sustainable development, peace and stability in the Arctic, improving the quality of life of the indigenous people of the North, including the local people in the North. And we are interested in having the Arctic remaining the territory of a fruitful dialogue and creative partnership. We very much hope that this conference will be a contribution to an in-depth expert discussion of the ways to achieve this goal, strengthening trust and mutual understanding in the region. Wishing you productive discussions and all the very best. Sergey Lavrov. Great many thanks. Artur CHILINGAROV is somebody that I don't think needs introduction. Everyone in this country knows him quite well. He has a lot of title. I won't denounce all of them. The only thing is that he is not yet the extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassador, but I believe that for all he did in the Arctic, we will give him that. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear Igor Sergeyevich, I am personally grateful to you, grateful to the Russian International Affairs Council for your attention to the Arctic and for holding this conference. In the end of August this year, on the board of the nuclear icebreaker 50th victory anniversary, we held the 6th international meeting of the representatives of the countries of the Arctic Council members and the observer countries, and the foreign expert community organized by the Russian Federation Security Council. On the agenda, the potential and the future of the international cooperation in the Arctic. Without exaggeration, one may say that cooperation in the Arctic is the role model of predictable, good neighborly policies, and that has been so far, and that has been the case today. But today I want to emphasize that it has always been this way. And we see that there are no problems in the Arctic which couldn't be resolved on the basis of mutual understanding and constructive dialogue. We don't see any problems which require military resolution. Cooperation in the Arctic develops upon bilateral and multilateral basis, and successful dialogue is being pursued within the Arctic Council, the Council of the Barents and North Arctic region, and the North Forum. An important platform for such a comprehensive debate of its problems were the International Forum, the Polar Circle held in Reykjavik, the St. Petersburg Forum, the Arctic, today and the future. Today, we heard that the date of Archangel event after 3-year period, the International Forum, the Arctic, the Territory of the Dialogue, and the State Commission for the Issues of the Development of the Arctic became the responsible body. I believe that I should also invite you because I participated in the first forum organization, and so I think that we should invite everybody to come. I mean, we're being very far from Reykjavik in terms of the number of attendees, because in Reykjavik there are about 2,000 people, but we still want to hold it in the Archangel, which is the North Polar city. One of the most important instruments of international cooperation in the Arctic was the Arctic Council, which today, this year, celebrates the 20th anniversary of its existence. The Arctic Council continues to unite and actively manage the work of the 6 working groups. There is a permanent secretariat, and the mechanism for funding the Arctic Council project has been launched as well. The most important element in the work of the Arctic Council was the institution of observers. Right now, it includes 12 non-Arctic states, 9 non-government and inter-parliamentary organizations, 11 non-government entities. So the Institute of Observers became an important instrument for participation of the non-Arctic nations in the development of the Arctic region. An eloquent example of a successful combination of knowledge, financial resources, and technical capabilities of the Arctic countries can be seen in the scientific research done in the Arctic region during the International Polar Year programs, and direct extension of these of the 4th International Polar Year was the International Partnership Polar Initiative. Its concept was proposed by Russia and is based upon the need to develop and well-coordinated extension of long-term observations and studies which were started during the first International Polar Year and the subsequent International Polar Year. So I believe that the implementation of this initiative is exceptionally important. I'm very happy to see that it is in the agenda of the Arctic Council deliberations. Particular sensitivity of the Arctic towards the changes in the climate and serious consequences for its environment and the economy and its people demand well-concentrated efforts on the part of all of the Arctic countries in the ability to assess these changes and urgent measures to adjust the Arctic territories to these changes. In case of Russia, which possesses the biggest Arctic coastal line, the development and the adoption of these expedient and urgent measures and the definition of its financial contribution is of extreme importance. In conclusion, I would like to say that I would like to touch upon certain issues of the regulatory support for the Arctic zone in Russia, which directly bear upon the development of the economic cooperation in the Arctic in the first place. The Russian Parliament should adopt the federal law on the Arctic Russian zone. Work over this draft law has started, and the Russian Parliament, I hope, in its 7th working session, will do its best, and I will make a contribution as much as I can. Thank you very much for your attention. Great many thanks, Artur Nikolaevich. As you have noted, all those present already have 3 invitations to come to Archangel, so I hope that at least you will be able to use one of them. This conference is dedicated to the 20th anniversary of the Arctic Council. The current chair are the United States of America, and I would like to say that, as deemed by everyone, this chairmanship heading the Arctic Council received a very positive assessment by all of the participants, despite, as I said, a complicated international environment. Our American partners were able to establish a very constructive work in the Council and achieve a lot of good things. So please allow me to now give the floor to the Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Ambassador of the United States in Russia, Jonathan Francis Taft.
Thank you very much, Igor Sergeyevich. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished officials, and esteemed colleagues. I'd like to say from the start, Artur, that I've always considered you to be the most esteemed, most extraordinary and plenipotentiary of all the Russians. I've known this man for over 20 years and have, I think, as much admiration as all of you do for him. I want to thank also the Russian International Affairs Council, and in particular Igor Ivanov, the President of the Council, for organizing this conference and inviting me to speak with you today. The Russian International Affairs Council has a well-earned reputation for fostering impartial, comprehensive debate on the challenges facing the world today. And I'm pleased that the Council has turned its attention today to one of our greatest challenges, ensuring a sustainable future for the people and resources of the Arctic region and protecting its beautiful, fragile, and vitally important ecosystems. The Arctic Council is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. It's a moment for countries and permanent participants of the Council to reflect on the accomplishments of the last 2 decades and to let those successes be our guide as we continue to work cooperatively toward a sustainable future. The Arctic is a vitally important region not only for the countries with territory in the Arctic Circle, but for the entire world. The rapid warming of the planet is one of the greatest existential threats of our time, a threat that knows no national boundaries or spheres of influence, a threat to all peoples and countries, great and small, and nowhere on the planet is the impact of this threat seen more clearly than in the Arctic itself. I don't need to list for a distinguished audience like this the facts and figures on the impact of climate change on the Arctic. We've all seen the images of the shrinking polar ice cap, the melting glaciers falling to pieces, the coastal villages crumbling into the sea as the shoreline recedes, and the starving polar bears floating on increasingly fewer and smaller patches of ice. It's for this reason that the United States made climate change the #1 priority for our current chairmanship of the Arctic Council. Ambassador David Bolton, the chair of the Arctic Council's Senior Arctic Officials Group, said it best when he told a meeting of the Arctic Council that, quote, "the effects of the climate change are revealing themselves faster in the Arctic than anywhere else in the world." So the Council's groundbreaking work to advance knowledge and prepare for the future is critical to helping Arctic communities build resilience in the face of these rapid changes. While climate change has made shipping and hydrocarbon development in the Arctic more feasible, it is imperative that those activities not exacerbate atmospheric warming in the region, as the effects could be catastrophic for the ecosystem. It is crucial that the Arctic countries, several of which are major economies and major carbon emitters, set in place policies to mitigate the effect of emissions and move toward low-carbon economic development in the Arctic region. The senior Arctic officials of the 8 Arctic Council countries recently concluded a meeting in Portland, Maine, at which they discussed key initiatives in black carbon and methane mitigation, as has been mentioned, and investment in renewable energy. The time is now for the Arctic countries to redouble their efforts to find solutions to the challenges presented by climate change. Our efforts to mitigate climate change would be incomplete without an equally diligent effort to conserve and effectively manage our ocean resources. The United States set ocean management as the second priority of our Arctic Council chairmanship, and Secretary of State John Kerry has made oceans policy a signature issue of his own during his time at the helm of the State Department. To set a sustainable policy in the Arctic, the coastal countries agreed in 2015 to a moratorium on fishing in the Arctic Ocean until sufficient scientific research is conducted to determine sustainable commercial fishing levels. The United States has encouraged expansion of the moratorium to other major maritime countries in order to bring them into debate on how to manage fishing resources in the Arctic. As more and more areas of the Arctic Ocean are accessible for longer periods of time, It is crucial that maritime countries come together to form a policy that allows all of us to benefit from the resources while doing our part to ensure sustainability. No discussion of a sustainable future in the Arctic would be complete without taking into consideration the needs and interests of the inhabitants of the region. The United States therefore set socioeconomic development as our third priority for the Arctic Council chairmanship. As the senior Arctic officials meeting in Portland, Maine, the officials discussed ways that the indigenous groups in all the Arctic countries can have a greater voice in policy making. The basis for integrating indigenous views and traditional knowledge in setting regional policies in the Arctic is, of course, national policies that ensure indigenous rights and empower indigenous groups to take control of their own lives and communities. In August 2015, President Obama visited Alaska, the first U.S. president to travel to the Arctic Circle region of Alaska, and he met with indigenous groups to get their views on how U.S. policies in the region affect their families, their livelihoods, and their living conditions. Those views are helping today to inform and shape our own Arctic policy. A common thread running through all of our priorities, mitigating climate change, managing ocean resources, and ensuring sustainable socioeconomic development, is the need for scientific research to further our understanding of the unique conditions in the Arctic. For this reason, the United States made the negotiation of an agreement on scientific cooperation the main goal of our chairmanship. An Arctic Science Ministerial took place at the White House in Washington on September the 28th. We were pleased to host ministers from all the Arctic Council countries, as well as several other countries conducting scientific research in the region. The ministers approved the text of an agreement on scientific research that will be signed at the next Arctic Council Ministerial in May 2017. The information produced through the research conducted under this agreement will help the Council make science-based decisions on policy in the region. The agreement will help countries to identify scientific challenges and their global implications, strengthen observation and data sharing in the Arctic, help apply science to build Arctic resilience and shape global responses, and empower Arctic inhabitants through scientific education. As we prepare for the upcoming Arctic Council Ministerial in May of next year in Fairbanks, Alaska, when the United States will turn over the chairmanship to Finland, we want to extend our thanks for the hard work that the Council and its working and expert groups have done, the support national and regional governments have given to the Council's work, and the valuable insight and advice the indigenous people have provided. We're pleased that Finland plans to continue these projects begun under our chairmanship and to expand the scope of joint work in a number of areas. So again, I want to thank our hosts for organizing this event, for giving me the opportunity to share the United States government perspective on the future of this vitally important region for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. As you could hear, the United States will pass on the relic to the next chair of the Council, which will be Finland. That's why I have a great pleasure to give the floor to Extraordinary Plenipotentiary Ambassador of Finland to Russia, Mr. Nika Autau. Good afternoon. Respected Deputy Chairman of the Government of Russia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, may, in my new capacity of a new Ambassador of Finland to the Russian Federation, I cordially thank the Russian International Affairs Council for the ability to participate in this conference. I also want to express my satisfaction that Finland and other Finnish people are actually participating in this event. Later on, you'll hear the presentation of Madam Eli Pocco. Well, international cooperation on the issues of the Arctic region is the topic of this conference, and for us in Finland, this is a very important issue, which for the last few decades we actively raised to the agenda of our discussion. As you know, Finland will receive the chairmanship role in the Arctic Council next year, and successful work this chairmanship position with maximum positive results is definitely an ultimate goal of our Arctic policy for our next years, and the international situation in general also emphasizes the importance of this goal. We bear special responsibility for the Arctic Council, since Finland time ago had initiated the creation and establishment of this council. The Arctic Council is the most important forum in our Arctic policy. It is supported and filled up bilateral Arctic partnership agreements. We have such partnership agreement with our neighboring country, I mean Russia. As it was said earlier, through 20 years of its existence, the Arctic Council has fulfilled quite a lot of important tasks. Starting from scratch, well, nowadays the Council unites 8 Arctic countries, 6 organizations of indigenous people, and number of observer countries. Well, and the binding agreement on cooperation in rescue operations and preparedness for immediate response for oil spills and oil pollution of the marine environment. Well, the Council fosters of scientific research activities, and most importantly, it plays an important role in international cooperation, presenting the forum for constructive dialogue, and even in the difficult times, it secures stable and safe conditions for our activities in the Arctic region. At yesterday's discussions and working exchanges, it was well expressed that the remote Arctic region is the object of joint interest, and the term of global utility has been used more than once. Such development definitely reflecting on the work of the Arctic Council. We hear and see a growing need in the intensification of the cooperation, considering the potential of this region and the need for closer interaction in political and economic efforts, and also in the sphere of protection of environment. Thus, the cooperation opens new opportunity for relation between our states, enterprises, and peoples. And the region, which in early times was mostly dividing us, becomes, well, a unifying factor, not only among the Arctic countries, but also on the global scale. Dear friends, representing the future chair of the Arctic Council, as I said, we consider, well, fostering and continuation of Arctic integration under any conditions. We shall continue implementing important projects which had been initiated under the chairmanship of the United States, and will strive for moving and passing on to Iceland stable conditions for continuing the work after our chairmanship as well. Long-term cooperation, there's no development, there's no long-term cooperation, and on the contrary, without development, we see the threat for long-term cooperation. Sustainable development in the Arctic region, well, resumes, well, peaceful development in the rest of the world, and stable rules of the game based on the international rule. Sustainable development means social and economic development in combination with healthy ecology. And we have all chances to achieve it if there is common will to be there. The environmental protection will be one of the key elements of Arctic cooperation in the future? Well, cooperation there of meteorology will be more and more demanded. Development of this region and well-being of the people living in the Arctic will be based upon the communications and development in the area of education. Economic development doesn't happen by itself, doesn't happen automatically. It presumes physical and information communications where the region is offering new potential opportunities. Also, it involves, well, a higher level of safety and well-being in the Arctic region. We, the Nordic people, are very persistent people. We have kind of resilience, which we call SISO, which means resilience and stubbornness in Finnish. Well, Arctic Council managed to complete even very difficult projects, very complex projects. I am sure that by defining, well, common political will among the states, we'll have all tools for completing our ultimate goals. In conclusion, I once again want to express thanks to the Russian International Affairs Council for organization of this conference and wish all participants of this conference successful work. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Well, the problems of Arctic concerning not only the states, but just the common people and broad public, understanding importance of cooperation in this region. One of such people as Frederick Paulson, honorary member of the Association of Polar Scientists of Russia and founder of the Swiss Polar Institute, to whom we give the floor with great pleasure.
Your Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues, we meet during dramatic changes in the polar regions. I'm risking to repeat the obvious, but over the last 50 years, temperatures in the Arctic and the Antarctic Peninsula have increased 3 times faster than those of the rest of the planet. In last August, the surface ice of the Arctic Circle was 35% less than 25 years ago. Climatic changes in the Arctic are not necessarily bad. They have heralded new commercial opportunities, particularly for shipping, tourism, fishing, and of course, mineral exploration and exploitation. Nevertheless, many challenges to safe commercial exploitation in this area remains. The Polar Code, which comes into force in January 2017, will go some way towards managing this inherent risk. When it comes to oil and gas, the so-called Arctic gold rush, which was widely predicted several years ago, has now, if you allow me, been put on ice due to the low price of oil. Still, one cannot be complacent. As the oil price recovers, there is little doubt that major players will once again see important opportunities in the Arctic with consequent environmental concerns, and we will need to have an international solution in advance to these. And I think that all of you here today should consider during this conference how we could establish a meaningful international collaboration. And I would like to contribute to this debate by looking at the role of science in the Arctic and Antarctic regions, and by presenting a particular example of a strong international collaboration taking place in the Antarctic. And I would like us to consider what we can take from the activity in the Antarctic to set up similar collaboration in the Arctic region. For me, science has a crucial role to play in addressing and managing the major uncertainties that are emerging in the polar regions as a result of climate change. Addressing the challenges in the Arctic demands a ramping up of international scientific cooperation. And it's my belief that the international cooperation which takes place in Antarctica should and may serve as an inspiration for doing so in the North. So, allow me to give you an example of how communities of scientists are currently working together to advance science in Antarctica. You might know that countries like Singapore, India, South Korea have polar institutes. So it should be no surprise to you that Switzerland also set up a polar institute this year. This institute will facilitate exchanges between public and academic institutions, industry, and private sector partners. And to celebrate the creation of the Swiss Polar Institute, we are launching the Antarctic Circumnavigation Expedition, which we call ACE for short. And the purpose of this expedition is to measure the impact of climate change and pollution in the Southern Ocean. We also hope to gain insight into health and medicine in difficult-to-access extreme environment. So if you allow me to give some details on the ACE project. This expedition is using a Russian research vessel, an ice-class vessel, which we have been able to secure from the Antarctic Research Institute in St. Petersburg. And we're extremely lucky to be able to have this collaboration with Russia. Without this expedition could not take place. The first part, the first step of this cruise is from St. Petersburg to Cape Town, and it's under the umbrella of the Russian Geographical Society. This trip will be transferred into the RGO Maritime University. And we have invited 60 young scientists from 8 different countries to give them the opportunity to participate in testing equipment and carrying out their experiments. Then the circumnavigation of the trip will start from Cape Town on the 20th of December this year, and it will take 3 stages, 3 steps, each lasting 1 month. First one from Cape Town to Hobart in Australia, then on from Hobart to Punta Arenas in Chile, and then from Punta Arenas back to Cape Town. And the idea is to visit all the 18 islands which are around Antarctica, which has not been done for over 100 years. Russia and Switzerland will be the main participants, but we will also be joined by 5 other countries whose island territories will be explored. South Africa, France, Australia, the UK, and you might be amazed that Norway actually has 2 islands there. An open international call for proposal was launched at the end of last year, and over 100 projects were submitted. And a panel of experts from these countries I mentioned selected 22 scientific projects. Scientists on board will have access to 8 research laboratories equipped by this Russian Research Institute, which will allow them to do testing on the samples they found in the sea and on land. So I really hope that this unique expedition could inspire more international scientific collaboration in the Arctic. And if this expedition is successful, I hope we can redo it in the Arctic. So I'm calling for and would be proud to participate in the organization of an international drifting base to research the rapid changes occurring in the heart of the Arctic Ocean basin. And I believe this could be established before the end of the current decade. And I envisage that such an international scientific project would be undertaken under a similar kind of umbrella as that provided by the Antarctic Treaty System. Of course, Antarctica is very different from the Arctic. It's a continent surrounded by an ocean and is largely unpopulated. The Arctic, in contrast, is an ocean surrounded by continents, bordered by 5 distant coastal states and populated by approximately 4 million people. These differences are vital for understanding the different ways in which the 2 regions are and can be governed. Yet, the continuing changes on the sea ice make it important to define ways of enhancing international collaboration in the Arctic. The Arctic Council was formed in 1996 for this very reason, to promote cooperation on science and environmental protection. So, has the Arctic Council done enough? If not, can we take inspiration from the Antarctic to promote further cooperation on science and environment in the Arctic? The Antarctic Treaty is unique in international law. It was signed in Washington by 12 nations, including the USSR, on the 1st of December 1959. Since the signing by the original 12, another 41 countries have joined the treaty. Today, scientific cooperation and data sharing between these countries remain one of the main drivers of new scientific discoveries on this vast continent. The Antarctic Treaty System establishes Antarctica as a natural reserve devoted to peace and science and puts in place principles for the governance of the regions. All countries with an active interest in Antarctica are consultative parties to the Antarctic Treaty, and science binds them together in peaceful collaboration and a common purpose. The protocol also outlines a system of environmental principles. The result is legally binding environmental protection regime tailored for the Antarctic region. All this is possible because Antarctica has no permanent population and because all sovereign claims to the continents have been suspended by the countries in question. It is clear, therefore, that there can be no identical treaty in the Arctic, but there can and must be major international collaboration in science. And here, at least one part of the existing Antarctic Treaty could be very helpful. The Convention on the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources was the first international agreement to apply an ecosystem approach to marine living resources conservation. This approach could be of particular importance if transferred to the Northern Ocean's ecosystem. Work is ongoing in the Arctic Council to encourage, is the word, the Arctic states to use an ecosystem approach relating to the conservation of the Arctic environment. But is encouragement really enough, or do we need to take steps towards developing a new binding international treaty? And here I believe Russia could really be leading. Could a convention on conservation of Arctic ecology be negotiated under the auspices of the Arctic Council with input from indigenous peoples, observer states, and international organizations? It is my urgent hope and recommendation that we should explore this idea further, not to prevent economic development in the Arctic, but to ensure that such economic development is sustainable and does not pose a threat to hugely important Arctic ecosystems. Our joint future in the polar regions will be defined by how we manage the ongoing changes we are seeing today. These changes will impact shipping, tourism, fisheries, aviation, and much more. National and international science programs focused on answering fundamental questions and taking into account key national interests will be critical for promoting peaceful international governance of Arctic and Antarctica. I truly believe that the time has now come to develop an environmental protocol as a first step to a convention on the conservation of Arctic ecology. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо, уважаемые коллеги. Вы, наверное, обратили...
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. You probably noted that on our banner you see a brightly shining sun, and this is the symbol of hope, a hope that Arctic, which really guarantees and supports, extension of life in this world, will be the focus of fostering of international cooperation. And in conclusion, I'd like to express thanks to the great sponsor, Novatek, of today's event, and also our permanent partner, Charity Fund Foundation Pew, for defining the agenda and preparation for this conference. Now we're going to announce a break, not for a long time, but before we do it, let's give a big hand to the distinguished members of this panel. Thank you.